Please be warned. Inspired by a True Story deals with crimes that may contain adult themes and violence, and is intended for a mature audience.
November 13th, 2000. A Polish man leaves work for a meeting with a client and is never seen alive again. How his murderer is caught is nothing short of fascinating. In 2016, Jim Carrey portrays a version of the detective who eventually brought this killer to justice in a completely different way. Always remember that print and the internet is forever, because Dark Crimes was indeed inspired by a true story. Welcome to True Crime for Cinephiles. This is inspired by a true story, a podcast devoted to keeping artists honest. And if you've never listened to our podcast before, first we discuss the overall details, the actual crimes. Then after that, we discuss the facts, as well as the film on its own and how much of it was true versus Hollywood magic. Remember to please share this podcast with your friends and review us in the app that you're listening to right now, if you can. I'm Aaron Peterson, an accredited film critic for the Hollywood Outsider podcast and website. Joining me today are my fellow film critics and true crime devotees, Amanda Sink.
Hello, with a new microphone.
There you go. And John Davenport.
Hey, buddy.
So Dark Crimes, let's talk about Dark Crimes. I had never seen this before. This is one of those Jim Carrey movies where he is dark. He's going
the best.
He actually was very good in this, right?
Oh, yeah.
He was excellent. In a movie that I don't think is excellent, he was excellent.
Yep, exactly. He really stood out. I was surprised with his performance and the level of seriousness he took through the entirety of it.
I almost feel bad for him as an actor because he has done so well in his chosen field, right? In the rubber-faced comedian field. He's so good at that and known for that. It takes a good amount of work on his part to let us not see that when he's actually trying to just be dramatic.
It actually made me wonder, what are the top 5 best random Jim Carrey serious performances out there? Because we know what the best performances are from a comedic standpoint, but I don't know that we give enough focus, like you're saying, to him as a serious actor. And this is not something that I think most people would have gone to watch. They wouldn't have gone out of their way to see it.
It's tough, particularly in this role. Every time Jim Carrey is on the screen, I almost was waiting for him to do something wacky. There's a scene where he's sitting in the car watching somebody, and it reminded me of the almost exact same scene in Ace Ventura. And I expected something weird to go on because
if this character went, alrighty then. That could have totally jazzed the movie up, honestly.
It would have been a very different vibe.
Would have gotten into it. I need to ask you a few questions.
This movie is very much what everyone thinks a foreign film is like, where it's weird and dark for almost no reason, where it just leans into every aspect of being dark for no good reason. It just goes so far to the point where it's just smoking a cigarette, staring into the darkness. Why? Just to be dark.
Yeah, well, we'll talk more about the movie shortly. We got to talk right now about the actual situation. And I'm kind of curious for you guys, had either one of you seen the movie? Did you know the history of this story at all before?
Nada, nothing.
Yeah, I didn't know anything about it.
It is wild. I mean, it's wildly interesting, wildly, honestly captivating when you kind of break into it. How this all broke down and how this came to be is actually far more fascinating than the movie even made it seem.
Yeah, I would agree.
Okay, so let's get into it. As of this recording, Dark Crimes is streaming on Prime, but that's always subject to change. And you can find the original article the film is based on, True Crime by David Gran, linked in the show notes right here. New episodes are released every 2 weeks and can be found wherever you listen to podcasts or at thehollywoodoutsiders.com. You can also hear episodes early by supporting the show at patreon.com/thehollywoodoutsiders and suggest a film or share your thoughts by sending us an email inspired@thehollywoodoutsiders.com. I am apologizing early if I mispronounce any names because Polish is not my native language.
I'm not even going to attempt.
I don't have a choice, Amanda.
I'm gonna say bad guy, dead guy, and women. That's what we're going with.
That's great storytelling. Love it. That's why I'm going to do this. All right, so film and true crime fans alike are always debating how true their true crime is. Boasting is the response of pride to success. Self-pity is the response of pride to suffering. This is the truth behind dark crimes. November 13th, 2000. Dariusz Janiszewski is a businessman in Wrocław, Poland. At some point in the day, he receives an anonymous call requesting assistance, an advertising opportunity of sorts, creating signs. The caller, who again goes unnamed, requests a private meeting with Janiszewski to discuss the opportunity, to which Dariusz agrees. The call would later be confirmed to have occurred from a public phone outside of Dariusz's office. Furthermore, the same phone rang Dariusz's cell phone minutes later. Dariusz left for his appointment, and witnesses saw him leave with two individuals. Or to word it more carefully, two men seemed to be following him. He was never seen alive again. December 10th, 2000. Three friends are fishing off the shore of the Oder River in Poland. One of them snags what appears to be a log with their line, and as they attempt to clear the reel, they notice hair. It soon becomes apparent this is a dead body. The police are immediately called and retrieve the body from the water. It is Dariusz Janiszewski. He has a noose around his neck, and his hands have been tied behind his back. The noose and the hands were connected by rope in such a manner that if the victim, while alive, had attempted the slightest of movement, it would tighten the noose even further. Dariusz could not even attempt to escape without further strangling himself. When identifying the body, Dariusz's wife could not even handle the identification process, so his mother had to do it. She had to step in and immediately noticed her son's birthmark straight away. The autopsy revealed Dariusz had been assaulted and starved for several days before his death, and that he ultimately died of strangulation. They could not rule out that he might have been alive when tossed into the river, meaning drowning could also have contributed. The case languished as no suspects could be located. Time went by. No motive could be found. No killer was brought to justice. And then about a year and a half later, investigator, for those of you across the pond, Jacek Wróblewski, who will, for all intents and purposes of my pronunciation, be Jacek going forward, is sifting through unsolved murder cases and begins to poke and prod into Dariusz's. A funny anecdote from David Gran was that Jacek is Jack in English, and Wróbel means sparrow, so his colleagues called him Jack Sparrow. Savvy?
Nice.
Kind of love it, at least.
Well, Jacek immediately focuses on Dariusz's cell phone. It was not on the body and was never found. The curious thing about it, though, was that it was still in use. So Jacek begins hunting the phone down and tracks it via the IMEI, the International Mobile Equipment Identity Number. He soon discovers the phone was initially sold to an auction site on November 17th, 2000, just 4 days after Dariusz went missing. And it was sold by a user, Chris B7. But this person also had another name, and that name was Krystian Bala. Krystian Bala was an educated man with sophisticated mannerisms. He held a Master of Arts degree in philosophy and even wrote a novel, which was published in 2003 titled Amok. Still, not having enough to prosecute, the police continued to search for connections between Dariusz and Krystian. And as Krystian was abroad in Asia, he could not even be questioned for some time. Jacek and his investigators did comb through Bala's blog, which held excerpts from his book, Amok. I mention this book again because a curious thing happened. Amok has a goat on its cover, the symbol for the devil. Yes, that one. As Jacek read Amok, which the author of the New Yorker article, David Gran, called sadistic, pornographic, and creepy, the main character who narrates the story is a bored Polish philosophical intellectual, sound familiar, who was obsessed with drinking and having sex with women. And this gave Jacek a sense of who Krystian was. Furthermore, in Amok, the main character, Chris, which is Krystian in English, murders his lover Mary for seemingly no reason. The methods were similar to Dariusz's murder, and at one point the character even mentions that he tightened the noose around her neck. Though it is important to also note the distinctions, such as Mary was also stabbed with a Japanese knife, and Dariusz was not. Though Chris does proclaim in this book that he sold his knife on an internet auction site, which is how the cell phone was also sold. Details in the book were grotesquely similar to Krystian, his life and Dariusz's death. The police inferred it was a roadmap to the crime. In their eyes, this cocky intellectual had physically confessed to the crime in the most abstractly fictional manner. But the court cannot use a piece of fiction to prosecute a criminal. They need tangible evidence. The phone records were solid, but they needed more. That doesn't mean the book couldn't be used to guide them, though. So the police used this blueprint, if you will, to establish connections between the suspect and the victim, and eventually identified a magnetic card used by the person who called Dariusz the day he went missing. By tracing this card, which was used numerous times, the police found that this random person also called people known to Krystian Bala. They also, finally, uncovered a motive. Bala and his then-wife Stasia had separated. Stasia had a brief fling with Dariusz. Bala even had a witnessed outburst proclaiming he could kill this man with a rope. This finally steered the investigation in the direction of the prosecution of one Krystian Bala for the murder of Dariusz Janiszewski. Krystian actually confessed at one point, and then withdrew his confession. But the case was made. Krystian Bala was found guilty of leading and orchestrating this crime with unknown accomplices and sentenced to 25 years in prison in 2007. He did receive a retrial on appeal and was convicted yet again. As of today, the accomplices have never been identified and remain free at large. Dariusz Janiszewski was a respected businessman who had a brief relationship with a woman attached to an insecure man who then reportedly murdered Dariusz. It's a tale as old as time. Jealousy, rage, revenge. What is new to this sordid tale is that, according to authorities, Krystian's compulsive need to document the crime and publish it for the world to see. Kudos to Jacek and his fellow investigators for piecing all of that together. It's a wild development. But really, the most important question is, why? Was it all a measure of cathartic relief? Did Krystian feel overwhelmed by guilt and thought capturing it in print could cleanse his soul? Maybe he saw himself as that goat on the cover. Or is it darker than that? Did a murderer feel so proud of his dark crimes that he was compelled to share it with the world? Did he want credit for what he deemed was his own brilliance? We may never know the true motives of why Krystian Bala did what he did and promptly published it, but one thing is very clear. If you truly want to keep your past a secret, it's probably best not to write a book about it.
We call that ego.
Very possible. So let's start there. Let's start with ego, right? Let's start with the $1 million question. Knowing all that information above, why do you think Krystian Bala wrote Amok? Do you think was it the ego? Was it the I'm so brilliant, look what I did and got away with? Or was it guilt? Was it I need to get this out there, I need it off my chest?
I'm sure there's components of both. I mean, we're never really going to know the answer, but in learning more about who he was and what he did, especially with his connection to philosophy, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a component that I think is also just wanting to, this is a crazy story.
It's wild.
When you think about it, it's a very crazy story. So it feels almost outlandish. And for someone like that to not write about the philosophical implications of these things happening, like he's able to dive into the psychology of it all and the philosophy of it all. And so I think there's probably a component there where it's like, this is too good of material to not, pour myself into.
Like the true documentation of a murderer. Like this is true insight into the mind of someone who would do such a thing.
Sort of. And I think it's also just like the environmental implications too. Like there's a lot to this story that is beyond just someone being a murderer. When you have the sadism that you do, masochism and all of that, like it's not just him that is interested in this.
The horrible part is apparently it seemed very much that he was beaten and starved for days. That's kind of what the autopsy alluded to also. They or Krystian or they, because there were other.
You had to have had an accomplice. Yeah,
right.
They noticed two men following.
Right.
And to me, that's like, okay, that's clear enough. You had really weird phone call. You have two people then immediately following this guy. And he was a big dude. Yeah. So there had to have been accomplices.
And so if that is accurate, that he was beaten and starved before he was ultimately murdered, that's an even deeper layer. Like you put a lot of time and effort into this. Now, we don't know, did Krystian Bala actually do the deed, or was that by the accomplice? We don't know. The accomplice has never been named or found. And he's, again, confessed and then retracted his confession. So it's a fascinating dichotomy of psychology in my mind. Like it's a curious study that this person would then put it to print, that such things were done. Now, I do think it's important to ask the question, right? Because let's just say, hypothetically speaking, maybe Krystian didn't do this. Let's just hypothetical. He was convicted. Not saying he's innocent, okay? But the fact that they came to him really, I mean, yes, the pieces led them to him, but when they're trying to convict him, they're going through his book and using the book as a blueprint. Couldn't that have just been similar because of what happened to a guy he hated because he had a relationship with his wife at the time?
Well, yes, but wasn't there were details. There was details that were there from him that weren't no one else would have known about. Only the police and the murderer. Yeah.
I get it. I mean, I'm not saying the guy's innocent. He was convicted twice. He's in. I get it. I'm just wondering, like, while the police are hunting this killer down, it's such a fascinating case that someone would actually put this in print, that they would do something horrible and then not get caught, get away with it. They're clear, right? There's no evidence that they can prosecute them with, and then finds the way to publish it publicly and also put it on the internet as if that's ever going to go away. Once you put it on the internet, it's there for life. I don't care how many times you delete that file. It's fascinating to me. This is an absolute, I think, a case study in psychology that should be studied for years.
Okay, but you haven't answered the question yet, even for yourself.
All right, what's the question? I forgot what it was.
The $1 million question. Why did he do what he did? Why did he write a book about it?
I feel, this is my take, is you have someone who was essentially a valedictorian at their school where they attended, right? He's got a Master's of Arts degree in philosophy. He is a genius by many accounts. He's a brilliant guy. One thing hyper-intelligent people love is to be recognized for their hyper-intelligence. It's just something that happens. Mm-hmm. I mean, look around. I don't know, maybe people that are on Twitter, things like that. There are many geniuses that want to be recognized for their accomplishments. And I think, this is my opinion, there's nothing factual behind this, is an opinion. It feels to me very much like this is a person who would, hypothetically speaking, I'm covering every base, right? Allegedly.
They're in Poland.
hey, cover the bases, brother.
Poland, and also convicted.
I know,
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah.
I would say that's someone who needs the world to know. Needs the world to know that they got away with this, that this was a crime that they did, and they want to rub everyone's nose in it because they're so smart, they're so intelligent, they're so brilliant at how they staged it. They got away with everything. They had no idea that they left traces right back to them. They're not nearly as smart as they thought they were. And then
So ego. You really do think it is ego?
Yes, ultimately, I think you were right. You summed it up with one word, and I probably should have shut up there. But then we'd have a much shorter podcast. So
It'd be a much shorter podcast.
Mhm.
But there's a lot of people talking about how he has very obsessive traits, in particular his fixation on his ex-wife. All that fixation mixed with the fact that nobody was really giving him recognition for what he did to the victim, and all of that turns this guy into not just ego, but there's a narcissistic element to it that's huge.
I could see that too. I mean, I bet you I would guess there's probably a part of him that also wants her to know, wanted her to know in some fashion. This is what I did because of what you did, because a lot of times when you have someone narcissistic or brilliant, they see that as an assault on them, right? You did this to me. You made me go this far. I wouldn't have done this if it wasn't for you. There's a lot of those inflections, and I could totally see that being an aspect to it too. Amanda, you're the one with the psychology degree. Does that make sense, or am I overreaching?
No, I think it makes sense, but it's hard. It's just hard to say what kind of position
people like this.
Yeah, because it can be so different.
I found the aspect of the goat on the cover, the symbol for the devil, as being the representation you chose for the book where you have the crime described in your book. To me, that also leads, maybe there is an element of guilt, like how he sees himself. Or maybe he's proud of the fact that he's like the devil.
I would probably wager more the fact that he's built this whole persona in his own mind about the fact that this is something to be proud of. And that's one of the reasons why first he confesses, and then he gets noticed and he gets all this stuff. And then he starts backing things up and, saying that the police forced him to do things. All of that becomes even more so a way to push his book out in front of people and get more eyes on it. And again, it helps his self-story, or the narcissistic side of him, be fed by all this attention.
I mean, it does sound, based on what he wrote, that it was very, David Gran, who wrote the original article, as I said, and the read through, very sadistic, pornographic, and creepy. So he has hypersexualized elements of his own personality to write those things. Don't get me wrong. I know people will, it's just fiction. Yeah. I mean, even Stephen King, he's got some shit going on in his head. You know what I mean? You can tell. The writing does show some of the layers behind the eyes, kind of thing.
Sometimes the writing is on the wall.
Sometimes.
What? Sometimes a call is coming from inside the house.
Sometimes. Yeah. We got to cover that movie someday, because that is inspired by a true story.
I will never sleep again.
Mm-hmm.
True story. And actually, it was kind of inspired by Black Christmas, too. But we'll get there. Probably next Christmas, maybe. So what about the detectives putting this all together? I mean, Jacek and his crew actually using this as a blueprint to capture a killer. I mean, we're going to talk about the movie shortly. One thing that kind of irritated me about the movie is that this story is great on its own. It didn't need to be refined and told in a completely different way. You know what I mean? This story is fascinating on its own. I would love to just see the story told as it is, as it happened.
Yeah, then it wouldn't be the almost comic version of a noir film to the point where it's exactly a noir film.
I'm just saying it would have been a better film. Honestly, but
it's definitely a different take. But I would like to see that too, because I think this is an interesting element to the story,
and it's impressive, right? I mean, a lot of times we don't give detectives enough credit, because sometimes, let's be honest, they stumble across the victim. It isn't always. I know we've talked about this in previous episodes. A lot of times, we're supposed to praise police work where it's, it took 25 years and finally they got a DNA sample from the first day, convicted somebody. Well, I don't know if I'd consider that great police work. It just finally science caught up to the crime. You know what I mean? And this is a case where I would say this is stellar police work. This is a detective who noticed something, picked up on it, ran with it, connected the dots, and really, really pieced it all together. And if it wasn't for him, if it wasn't for that detective kicking it off, without Jacek, I don't think he ever gets caught.
Yeah, no, it was very cool how they ended up doing this, because the case goes cold in 2000, but then Jacek ends up picking up things here and there and reopens it and just runs with it. And so in 2003, that's when he published the book, when Bala published the book, and then Jacek ends up running with it, and it's crazy.
Well, he started picking it up a year and a half after the case. So it was after it went cold, which is in the 2000s. So it was probably like near the end of 2001 or early 2002, whenever it was. And he connected the dots, and then the book was later. So he connected in terms of the phone. The cell phone was really the thing that got things going. Finding that cell phone, finding it on the auction site, and then later finding the book and the articles that were online that led to the book really is what connected all of these dots. Like, it was a fully encompassing investigation that really, seriously, it just impresses the hell out of me. I take credit away from cops when they don't need it, and I'll give it to them when they deserve it. And this is one where I would say, wow, good on them.
Good job, Veronica Mars.
How do you say Veronica Mars in Polish? That's really the important question I have, because...
Veronica Mars?
Okay, Hitler.
I don't know.
I don't think that's how it works.
Did I sound German?
Yeah, you sounded a little bit, Christoph Waltz was going to show up or something.
Christoph Waltz.
I think it's weird that Bala has never given up the people who helped him with this. Because, again, it's obvious that people helped him. A couple guys picked up this guy.
You can't appeal it. Can't appeal it and hope for maybe an innocent verdict down the road if you confess to it. That's the trick. That's the trick when you've got someone who's trying to get off and say, I didn't do this. You can't prove it. If he wants to appeal it again, or if he gets a mistrial, or somehow he's already appealed it once and went back, got a retrial. If he tries to go again, what's he going to say? Well, I had an accomplice, but I didn't do it. The accomplice did it. That guy did it.
Likely the rules are different in Poland than they are over here. But maybe he can't even use that as a bartering tool to get himself reduced time or anything.
Maybe. I don't know what the rules are there, but you got to think they offered it to him, right? You tell us who the other person is, and we'll cut you a deal. And then if you take the deal, you're admitting culpability. It's catch-22.
Mm-hmm.
Or however they say catch-22 in Poland. Yetch-22.
I'm definitely not going to try.
I love podcasts that drop those pronunciations so seamlessly. And anybody who does a podcast knows that there is so much editing that goes behind that to make sure that it is correct.
Yeah, and poor Aaron has to deal with somebody with a stutter, so...
Yeah, where they have top-notch producers. It could be that, too. All right, so jealousy, right? It has to be the number one motivator for murder at this point. Ultimately, all of that because you're jealous. And it just, we've seen this over and over again in true crime, and it fascinates me that this is... So many people are willing to throw their lives away because they can't handle someone else going elsewhere.
If we think about it, though, the root of jealousy is control. And typically the root of control is fear.
Yeah.
So people often think that it's about jealousy. It's not. It's what they're scared of. And it's what they've experienced that led to that fear that's rooted in them.
This movie is so dark, I'm surprised they didn't say those exact words in this movie. Just the way she said it. The root of jealousy is control. And the root of control is fear. All right,
well, let's segue to this movie because we're already talking about it. So if you didn't know, Dark Crimes, the movie that we're talking about referring to this crime, it's a murder investigation of a slain businessman turns to clues found in an author's book about an eerily similar crime. It's based on that 2008 article, True Crimes, a postmodern murder mystery by David Gran for The New Yorker. Starred Jim Carrey, Martin Sokas, Charlotte Gainsbourg, and directed by Alexandros Avranas. Now, I will say, if you don't know who Marton is, he was in The Equalizer. He was the bad guy in The Equalizer, great bad guy. And
fantastic bad guy.
Nobody does creepy, sexy freak like him, I think.
I don't know how anyone knows who you were referring to with the way you pronounce these names.
You know what? I do the best I can, Amanda, on a limited education.
You're trying.
I was not a valedictorian of pronunciations of names in foreign lands. I apologize. It is what it is. So as a standalone film without any real knowledge of the case, what do we think of the movie? We talked about Jim Carrey. Let's start with the performance, right? We'll come back to that. Here he is disheveled. He grows a full-on beard. He is just a manic man trying to repiece. He's been disgraced because of a previous time when he tried to take down someone, his chief of police. And now he's just struggling to land a case and finish a case that will put him back in the precinct's good graces so he can retire with honor. His performance is wonderful. The movie is terrible. That's my take on it.
I will never watch the intro of this film again.
Oh, the sex. It opens with like a dominatrix sex. There's like a lot of sex
club. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff in the beginning where it's just that's a little difficult.
Bondage, domination.
It's more than that. It's a sex club with rape.
Yeah,
they're drugging them.
It was pretty tragic. It was pretty horrific. Sorry for the
and
trigger.
It was very visible, and like it starts out with people hanging, and you're like, "What the is going on?"
And then it doesn't play that big of a portion of the story.
What?
I didn't think it.
Did you watch the movie? It's the whole motivation she has for what she did.
Oh,
wow! Just wow, man. Just wow.
So she was in the club.
She literally was the piece that was bounced around, and she's the one that killed him. The person that she's investigating, it wasn't who he thought the whole time. It wasn't Kozlov. It was Keisha the whole time.
I mean, I got that part.
I don't think you did. I'm not convinced you did. At this point.
Did. I just
for
whatever reason
doesn't feel like you did, right?
No, maybe I did.
It feels like we had a real time insight into you realizing what happened in the story.
Yeah,
we heard it in real time.
I probably just clicked. It all probably just clicked just now.
It did.
Yeah,
you do know he's not just sleeping at the end, right? He's not sleeping.
Wait,
at the
he's
end?
not just sleeping?
No, it wasn't a nappy time. Nope, he's dead.
Oh my god!
Because she killed everybody.
Yeah, that makes that. You know what? My whole theory this whole time is like he wakes up and he's Ace Ventura when he wakes up after that.
All right, back to serious
what a
conversation.
Wild story. It is. Jim Carrey's performance, though, was fantastic. I cannot give enough props to him for his performance here because I kept waiting for him to be the funny man. Or to like make a joke or break character in some way, and he never did. And then he would go deeper and darker into the character, and I was like, "Wow, okay, wonderful." But the movie itself was very slow and drawn out.
I even thought his fluctuating Polish accent was solid.
Yeah, I mean, he had problems with it, but it was still really good. I loved the explosions that he would have near the end when he's just getting so frustrated that he throws a chair, or he is just yelling, or when he finds his mother dead.
That is the best scene of the movie. When he finds his mother dead, when he promised her, "You're not going to die alone," and then he gets there, and he has that mental breakdown. Best scene in the movie. That's like, if this is a better movie, he gets an Oscar nomination for that scene.
It was so just so heart-wrenching.
And then I just feel bad. I feel bad for him. I really, really feel bad for him because he's an actor he's tried to get some of that Adam Sandler clout, in terms of for dramatic work. He's tried to branch out, and it always seems like it's a struggle. It's always been a struggle for people that are most known for comedy to branch into dramatic work. And
which is ironic because comedy is one of the hardest for anyone to be truly successful and good at.
Agreed. And he's great here. I mean, he's shown it before. Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind is an obvious example. Number 23, I think he's very good in that movie. And where his character is Walter Sparrow, by the way. So, another Sparrow connected character. But it's He's a very good actor, and this shows he's a very good actor. Unfortunately, it's just the film around him was not that. The stories. What do you think the problem is? My take is the story they're using is good. I like the story. I think it could have worked very well. It's just, however it's shot, it feels very dull and kind of, I don't know, almost as monotone as the color palette they're using for the cinematography.
I would agree with that.
Well, it's very much a caricature of this style of movie where it takes it so far into that level of being a dark noir where it's just like I'm surprised there wasn't a scene where we saw somebody peeing on another human being for no good reason, just randomly in the middle of the police station.
That's weird and random, but I somehow agree with that.
Yeah, like it's just
like just the worst of the worst things.
It leans so far into it that it's a caricature where you're almost like this is unnecessary. This is unnecessary. But where it works the best, where it starts pushing it in the best ways, is those scenes in the interrogation room where you have Martin staring at you, or you have Jim Carrey staring at you.
Oh man, when Kozlov and Tadek are going at it, and he's like, "When you're finished, it's my turn." I love that line.
Ooh, that was good.
That was so cool. And then he comes out and he freaking just tells the media,
You're
basically,
fucked.
this cop just destroyed me and he did all these horrible things. Like he's using the media like there are pieces of what could have been a great movie that could have elevated Jim Carrey to maybe Oscar nomination category. But unfortunately, the writers and the director could not come together to make the movie coherent enough, I think, and engaging enough. It's a cool story overall. Like even their take on it is a cool story. It just wasn't fleshed out well.
The movie does a very good job of showing you the story, but it's not telling you a lot of the story either.
Fair. Like you really have a hard time knowing what's going on 20 minutes, half hour into the movie. It's still very unclear as to why is this a big deal for you?
Yeah. But you can tell, okay, I can tell it's a big deal for him. I can tell that he's having a huge problem with it and he's on the verge of a mental breakdown. But why? Why? We haven't gotten to the why. Give me a little bit of exposition. Give me a little bit of like talking to me as a viewer. I respect the fact that you're trusting me to be a good viewer who's going to follow your story, but I'm an idiot. Don't give me that much room.
And that's exactly why John figured out what happened, the conclusion of the story on this podcast. I think we already answered what the problems were here. And we had it demonstrated in real time.
Look, I think they were very clear as to what happened. I think John went out for a walk or something right in the last 5 minutes because it's
possible.
Pretty clear.
You never can tell with me.
Pretty clear. It really is sad how that ends. Like he loses everything, including his life at the end. And but that could have been so impactful. It could have been so impactful. I did like the reveal, how she tells the story, she tells him the truth, and then it just pulls away, and he's already dead because his dumbass drank. Let her make a drink, and she Cosby'd it up, and then he went out.
Is that a saying now?
It
Cosby'd it?
It should be.
God.
He's gonna make it one.
It's gonna happen.
I think he just did.
Allegedly Cosby'd.
Well, there was a conviction there too, right?
It was overturned.
Oh shit. Allegedly, Cosby.
One thing that's worth pointing out is before Jim Carrey was attached to the movie, there were a couple other actors considered before he was. And the first choice for the role of Tadek was Christoph Waltz, who we talked about earlier.
But he left, that's why he was on mine.
Yeah, he left for unknown reasons. And also they offered it to Morgan Freeman, but he turned the role down. He wasn't interested at all. And then Jim Carrey jumped on it. I think, he wanted to kind of go outside of his wheelhouse for a bit. And
those are two other good choices, though.
Great choices. I can see both of them.
All great choices. Yeah.
I feel like Morgan Freeman's already done this character with Alex Cross, so I don't really know. And, just a more extreme version of Alex Cross, I guess. I don't know if he needed to do this again.
I like that it gave Jim Carrey the opportunity to show off his dramatic skills.
He impressed the hell out of me. Like, seriously, I did not expect him to be as good as he was. It just breaks my heart that if people ask me, what did you think of Dark Crimes? It's going to be, I think Jim Carrey gives a great performance in a terrible movie.
Yeah, it's too bad. But I would still tell people, if you want to see Jim Carrey in one of his best performances, you can still go watch it. Just be prepared. SA trigger warning.
Yeah. If you look at the three main characters, Jacek, Charlotte's character, and Martin's character, all of them are strong examples of how to act. Those three characters. Everybody else is a little bit like, okay, I can take or leave this person.
I'll push back on that. I feel like Kozlov was the most stereotypical of bad guys in crime films. But he was good enough. He was a good villain. But then you get to the end and you hear the reveal and everything. And you're like, well, that's just stupid.
Yeah, he's a patsy.
Yeah, but he's okay with it. And he's just like, I guess he's trying to protect her because he really does love her. Okay, I get all that. But he doesn't seem to do much to protect her from the other people in the world that are abusing her. So to me, it kind of runs counterproductive in many respects.
All right, I can see that.
So, wild film. So what the movie got right, and did it respect the victims? I do not think it respects the victims at all, because, Dariush was the actual victim of the crime, and they basically, the victim in the movie is kind of seen as a sexual deviant. And I don't think that's really fair when you're basing it on this case, and this guy is not known for that.
No, that's not fair at all to
That's
the
fair.
victim at all.
And I will say, like, if it was just it wasn't anything that was mentioned, but they mention it directly in the movie that it's referenced from that article, which also says that it's, inspired by that guy. And so you're already connecting that dot on the screen. And it's not fair to the victim. It's not. He was brutally beaten, starved, and murdered. This is not a person that deserves to be called a sex freak and as a victim. Like he basically at the end, she's saying, don't feel sorry for the victim. And it's just, I don't think that's fair when you're inspired by a true story like this.
Yeah, it's almost like they wanted to take such a serious look at the case and make it super powerful and impactful and show the effects that it has, while at the same time not at all showing the ramifications that happened in the true story.
Right. So what the movie got wrong or left out, was it worth it? It's really the only thing that is the same is that he wrote a story that was similar to what happened to the victim. Now, this is actually in the movie, it is Kasha's story. And he's just basically telling it. And you would think at some point she would be like, hey, man, don't write that story because, I'd rather get away with this. But it's the movie, and the movie is what the movie is. The real case is that he wrote it himself, and he's just telling the world what he did for his own reasons. So that's the only thing that's the same. And that the cop did figure it out and kind of put that together and caught him. But I guess in the movie, he doesn't catch the criminal. Not only does he get away with it, she gets away with it too. Because he was complicit. He did know she did it, obviously.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Interesting. What would you guys have done differently? Me personally, I would have just told the whole story.
Yeah, I think it's that simple. We just would, I think we all, I shouldn't speak for John yet, but I think most of us, at least, are hoping to see the real full fleshed out story told on screen, and or one that goes into the victim's story and one that goes into the investigator's story.
Yeah, it's tough to say what I would do differently. I don't know if there's a way to do it differently without just it constantly referencing back to this movie and having the shadow of how much black is all over this cast on it. I agree with you both that telling the actual story would probably be a lot more interesting, and leaving out some of the aspects of where the detective is just having the worst life ever. I can probably do without that. Let's let him be a hero for a hero's sake, not because he's trying to dig himself out of a hole.
Actually, I didn't mind that part of it. That part was actually interesting to me because he's trying to salvage his career and whatnot. I mean, but I felt bad for the guy. It's like nobody in his house talks, and his wife freaking is just not into him at all, and he's not into her. I mean, this is a dead marriage, number one. And he loses everything. And, even when he gets his man, he didn't get his man, like, there's no winner in this, which is fine. I mean, movies can be very good that way. It just didn't happen to be.
I don't even think his daughter had a face.
I don't even know if she had a name. Like, if her daughter had a name, I don't know what it is. And I feel like his wife's name was Lady in the Room because she was just the lady in the room when he came home.
Facts!
Yeah.
She just stared. It's over if you take another step. And her face just staring.
Yeah, and then he takes it upon himself like, wow, it's a great time to bang my witness. Okay.
The decisions were wild.
It was, I mean, that felt like...
I'll show her. Let me show back up a chlamydia. We'll be okay.
Ew.
Ew.
The fact that at that...
At least it's treatable.
That
right?
really bothered me in the movie because it was up to that point, it was a straightforward crime thriller, guy's trying to get his man, da-da-da. And then it turns into Basic Instinct all of a sudden, and it doesn't fit. what had come before it. And it just irritated me. Unless because they didn't really show him obsessed with his lifestyle and wanting. It always showed him disgusted with these people that are going to these sex clubs and doing these horrible things. And Gregor being this kind of sexual deviant. And then all of a sudden he's doing the deviancy. And I guess but it was a great scene for Jim Carrey. He acted the hell out of it. I mean, his orgasm scene was quite affecting.
He really had built that up.
He did a good job.
That's what I took away from that moment.
Snickers.
I was like, damn, he really, that interrogation scene where he's like, and I bet you and your wife haven't fucked in so long. Yeah. That was true. He was sitting there in his head. He was like, facts. And he started thinking about it. He's like, damn, I guess I really could get some. And then he got some and he was like, oh my God, it's been years.
And you know what?
His face said years, brother.
His face did. And at the end of that, if then he would have dropped in, alrighty then. Oscar!
Scene.
That's the Oscar.
Oh my God.
Yeah, that's the Oscar shot right there.
Right there.
I was blown away by the fact that he started getting into the idea of smacking her around during the whole process.
I was shocked.
Yeah.
I was like, this is, brother, what are you doing, man?
This took a turn. This definitely took a turn. I'm telling you, went Basic Instinct for no reason whatsoever.
I did not like that at all.
Michael Douglas could have been sitting in a chair and I wouldn't have been surprised.
I was waiting for him to then disengage from it because it was like, oh no, I don't want to become that person.
Right.
That's what I was waiting for.
And at no point, while this very loud, audacious activity is taking place, the kid in the other room is the kid in the other room is just, I guess, got earmuffs on. I mean, he's doing it like old school.
They're used to it. Daddy's rough.
I get it, but my God, at some point, does this kid make any? Hey guys, can you keep it down? I mean, I hear some smacking going on in the other room.
Broom in their bedroom and just slams it on their ceiling.
Right.
Knock it off.
I wish somebody would have stopped him. I don't know. Sorry, that was bad. All right, guys, that's going to do it for this episode. If you enjoyed this podcast, please share the show on your social media outlets, as well as give us a review in your favorite podcast app, because you are the best source of promotion. So tell your friends about this podcast. Thanks for listening to Inspired by a True Story. Now, let's keep those artists honest. I'm going to never watch this movie again.
Ditto.
Nuh-uh. No way.